Hey, what's up everyone? Clarence here. Let me tell you a quick story. 6 months ago, I was drowning in work, sending emails, following up, and trying to close deals. By my definition, I was truly hustling, but it wasn't scalable, so I needed a system. Fast forward to today, I run a 6-figure agency earning over $50,000 a month thanks to the automation systems I built in N8n. These systems not only save me hours each week, but also give me peace of mind knowing nothing falls through the cracks. That's because these systems never sleep and they never forget anything, unlike me. Today I'm sharing one of these systems with you, an AI inbox manager that replies to leads while you sleep. Yes, you heard that right. This system will handle email replies on autopilot. Why is this necessary? Because I know many of you face the same problem I did. Whether you're just starting out or scaling your agency, managing replies can be overwhelming and very, very time consuming. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll have the tools to build your own inbox automation system. Let's get into this. All right, let me paint a picture for you guys. Imagine this. You've spent days crafting the perfect cold email campaign. You hit send on that campaign and boom, leads start replying. You start seeing results. Results just like what you see on screen right now. This is a screenshot, or these are two screenshots out of my Instantly account. One of them is from a campaign I ran for a social media marketing agency, and the other one is from a campaign that I ran for a web development or a web design company. You can see that both of the reply rates were around 7%. For those who aren't familiar with cold email reply rates, that's about 2 times the market average, so I'm pretty proud of this. Sadly, not all of those replies were positive. Some weren't interested, some were asking to unsubscribe from the email list. But let's say about the average of 37.5 and 25%, let's say about 30% of those replies were positive, totaling me in 52 emails just for these 2 campaigns, meaning I had to reply to 52 emails. Well, I'm happy to reply to 52 positive emails, but it takes up a lot of time. And I also had another problem, that problem being that all my targets live in the US and I live in Amsterdam. So while they're responding 3 p.m. their time, it is 3 a.m. for me. So I would wake up to a flood of emails, and by the time I had replied, it was already too late. Leads went cold, conversations fizzled, and opportunities were lost. Now, here is the important part. In sales, speed is everything. Studies show that the faster you reply, the higher the chances of closing the deal. Those critical first few hours after a reply are golden. But in my case, let's be real, I couldn't sacrifice sleep to sit by my inbox all night hoping for a response. This is a problem I faced early in my career. I remember missing a reply from a lead who was ready to close on a $10,000 deal, but because I didn't respond until the next day, I missed that one, and let me tell you, that one stung very badly. So I thought there has to be a better way. And that is when I turned to automations. I realized I could build a system to do the heavy lifting for me, like categorize the replies, engage leads, and keep the conversation alive, all while I slept. And today I'm going to show you how to do exactly the same. Now that we have set the stage, let's talk about what we're building. The goal is simple. Create a system that manages your email replies so you don't have to. This system will handle replies while you sleep, keep your leads engaged, and ensure you never lose out on potential deals, just like I did all the way at the beginning. So here is the big picture. For those who are not familiar with N8n, which is the software you see on screen, which I use as the glue to build all my automations with, I've tried to break it down. That's why I'm using these post-its over there to kind of break down the entire system you see into much more easily digestible steps. So first of all, because this is an email inbox management, we can only manage emails that we receive. So we wait for an incoming email. That happens over here. Then the email needs to be classified. It needs to be put into a category. In this example, I only chose 3 categories to keep it a bit simpler, but you can work this out as you go along. But this system, as you see it right here live on screen, takes care of 90% of what it needs to do. Then we'll have the AI write an email response based on the email they received. So it needs to read the email properly. And then lastly, we have to send the email. For sending the email, I always used Instantly. So I'll show you guys a quick preview of how that works and how to set up the API. Now that you guys have an understanding of what you can expect from this system and I've seen a little bit of a breakdown, let me dive into how you can copy this for yourself and set this up for yourself. So If this would be a live system, it would be triggered by a webhook, but because it's very difficult to show you guys an example based on a webhook, I'm using an API from Instantly to get me the emails. I'll quickly show you guys the API documentation on the Instantly website because it's very straightforward. Here you go. I mean, you can read through the documentation if you'd like, but all you'd really need to do from here is copy this code, this C URL code, take it like there, and we open the HTTP request node, and we just import the curl or C URL. I'm not really sure how you say it. And then this is all filled in automatically. In the API documentation, you can see specifics of what this all means. So let's say you only want the latest of the thread, of the email thread, then you can only fetch that specific email. You can set campaign IDs if you only want to receive or fetch emails from certain campaign IDs, you name it. And then on the right side, the output side, we see what our API call returned. In this case, it was a test email I sent to myself. Here, Clarence Snap, and what the email entailed. Moving on, this is a step you can skip, but because I always like to have everything synchronized, so I also want my email system to be synchronized with my CRM, and for my CRM I use Airtable. So I get the lead info because I need the record ID of the specific lead, well in this case the lead being myself, but I need the record ID to further down the line if I want to update the status of the lead based on the email that they sent me or the email they replied with. I need the record ID to then update it and update the correct record, as you can see. But I'll go over that in a bit, so don't worry. So once you've received the email from Instantly and it's inside of your workflow, we need to filter the HTML. This is a returning topic in my videos because most of the time something needs to be filtered somehow. In this case, it is the email. As we can see on the left side, this is the body of the email, like the entire thread, so also all replies. And a lot of this, everything within brackets and stuff, is all code we don't need. So we use this, very similar to what I use to filter HTML of websites. And we get the filter text on the right, which is only the text, email addresses and dates. Continuing on, because in an email thread, there is an email we send and there's a reply. So to keep things as simple for the large language models in this workflow as possible, I wanted to split out the body of the email into each individual email that was sent back and forth. In most cases, it would just be your cold email or maybe your cold email and your follow-up and then their reply. And I wanted to split those out. That's why I added this ChatGPT node. So inside of this ChatGPT node on the left side, we can see the entire body of the email. So the latest response and all of the previous that were sent. As you can see, there were a bunch because I did some testing back and forth. And then this very simple prompt just tells the AI to split out based on some parameters and also output it as a JSON, which results in all of the emails being split separately on the right side. So for this workflow of today, we're focusing on the most recent email, which is the top one because it's in chronological order. And the content of the email was, sounds great. What is the price of all of this? Then we need to do some sentiment analysis. We need a large language model, in this case, once again, ChatGPT, to kind of read the email and maybe the thread as a whole and identify what we need to reply to. That all happens in this node over here. So I'll quickly go over the prompt for you guys. You are an email classifier designed to analyze incoming email from B2B cold outreach campaigns. Your goal is to accurately classify responses into predefined categories. Well, there are 3 categories, like ready to schedule, more info needed, or not interested. I'll go over these more in depth in a bit. And then here I just input the most recent email 0, which corresponds to, well, as I said, in chronological order, the most recent one. Then below the system prompt, I have defined the categories and I have given it some examples of the phrases that might be inside of such an email, just to make the job of the LLM a lot easier. I've done this for the ready to schedule category, I've done this for the more info needed, and I have done this for the not interested. Important thing to note is that I've only asked it to output whatever category it has assigned to the email. In this case, this was more info needed. Well, that's the same conclusion I would have drawn from the email. Sounds great. What is the price of all of this? Then I have placed a edit node. This edit field is necessary to make my life a bit easier. All I've done is taken this from the left. So I wanted to identify the content and I wanted to output the answer. So the content over there and then output more info needed, or in the case he would not be interested, output not interested, or if he sent over some dates that he was ready to schedule a meeting, then I want this to say schedule a meeting. And that is because of the next node. The next node is a switch node. All this switch node does is based on the exact output of this LLM email classifier, sent it down the appropriate flow. So there are 3 options, as I said. There is the ready to schedule option, there is the more info needed option, and there was the not interested option. By now, I hope it's clear that the email we received was a request for more information, namely the price. What we see next in the flow is another Airtable node. I already touched on the fact that here we get the record ID. So inside of my CRM, the status of this lead, so the lead that responded to my outreach, would be changed to more info needed sent. So I know that he replied to my message and there has been a reply sent back to him. So if I don't hear anything, I can follow up manually or put him into a subsequence. I'll be touching on the ready to schedule part of this flow and the not interested part of this flow a bit later on. But because this example is about the more info needed, and I also think that's the most interesting part of this workflow, I'll finish this one first. So once the status is updated of my lead inside of my CRM, I've asked this LLM, this ChatGPT node, to do a quick check. Because I've been doing business for quite a while, I have a list of frequently asked questions, which I have pre-written email responses to. And I always ask the same whenever I onboard a client. All of my clients already have existing businesses and they have had a lot of calls, they've had a lot of email communication, most likely. But let's say they just had a lot of calls and they know kind of the questions people might be asking when they tell about their services. So you can do the same thing. You'll just compile a list of all of those questions and write some pre-written responses to those to then input that into a vector database and give the large language model access to that vector database so it can read the email, identify the question in this case because there was more info needed, and then look for the pre-written response and use that response to alter it maybe a bit and then send that back to your lead. You could also, of course, skip the entire vector database and just let the AI read the email and write a response all by itself. But I found that your output is a lot more consistent if you just give it examples. And of course, consistency is what we're looking for with this. For those who are not familiar with a vector database is just like a giant storage. In this case, it's data about frequently asked questions, and you can give the large language model access to that database to quickly search for whatever it needs to fulfill the task you're asking from it. I won't be diving too much in depth about the vector database in this video. That's because I'm not really about how-tos on this channel. There's a lot of other videos on the internet about vector databases and how you can upload things to them and how you can give the large language model access to whatever you've uploaded. But if I read a lot of comments asking me to go further in depth about vector databases, I'll be sure to make a video about it. So let me know if you have any questions. Before moving on, I'll quickly go over the prompt. So the prompt, as you can see, is quite long, but what I wanted to do is to analyze the context of the email. I wanted to identify the question that's being asked and then check the vector database for a reply to that question. There is the possibility that nothing in my vector database matches that reply. And in that case, I want this to be sent off to a human via Slack, or the human being me in this case. And I also want the output to be in a JSON, as you can see on the right side. When it comes to the question about the price, I strongly suggest to not directly answer the question about the price. My pre-written answer to that would be the pricing for Emphasis, which is the name of my agency, depends on the unique needs of your business. I prefer to discuss how they can deliver the most value for your sales efforts before diving into costs. It's recommended to schedule a call. This goes for almost all information requests. Whenever someone asks more information about your services or about your cost, and you give them that answer, the possibility of them never replying again is very likely. I'm not really sure why. So instead of giving them a clear answer, always say you would love to give them more information, but you'd rather get them on a call to talk about it and talk about the value you can add, which is a lot better and gets you a lot more actual meetings, and actual meetings also resulting in more closed deals than just straight up answering the question, which I still to this day think is kind of strange. So as I just said, there is the possibility that the question being asked is not on my list, is not in my vector database. If that is the case, I want this to be sent off. I want the question to be sent off to me so I can look at it myself and write a response instead of the AI just making something up. That's why this if node is in place, because if the question is not on my list, it will output unavailable. And then the if node will see if there's an unavailable present in the response, yes or no. And if it is present, it will send me a message on Slack with the email reply from them so I can read it from my phone instead of having to go to my computer. If the unavailable is not there and there is an answer, I want the next large language model to read the information that was retrieved from my vector database and write me an email response. I'll show you the result. So the pricing of apps and services depends on the unique needs of your business. We prefer to discuss blah, blah, blah. It just turns the pre-written answer into a tailored message toward the recipient. Important thing to note is that there is some HTML in this response. I did that on purpose, as you can read in my prompt. Please provide the HTML content without any backticks or code block markers. You might be wondering why. Well, this is because if you upload this message through the Instantly API without any HTML in it, it would just be one long line, which doesn't look professional at all, especially if you finished up with cheers Clarence, for example. So be sure when you're automatically replying to emails through the Instantly API to use HTML to structure and properly format the email. So you might be wondering why after there's a wait node and why there's this Slack node. That's because let's say you just built out this system, you just copied me or you downloaded this flow out of my school community and set it up for yourself. You want to test this out because a positive reply to your outreach is very valuable. So you don't want to mess it up because it can be very costly. That's why I always suggest if you have things like this and you're testing it out, use a Slack node or a Telegram node or whatever. So what happens is that the email response written by this large language model sends the email that has written to my Slack, so for me to review. So it's kind of like a draft email. I just get it in my Slack inbox so I can check it on my phone very quickly, see, hey, does this need some touches or can it be directly sent through the Instantly API? I mean, if you run this for a few weeks, you know if there are any kinks or anything you need to tweak. And if you think there aren't any things to tweak anymore, you can just remove these Slack nodes and put the Instantly API in their place. And to answer the question about the wait nodes, well, we need this to be as human as possible. This flow would write a reply and send the reply within seconds. And the recipient of those emails would most likely be very shocked and also think something was up, because there's no way you can read, write, and send an email within seconds. That's why we're adding the human touch and having a bit of a time delay. You can set this to like a static number, let's say 15 minutes, but I want there to be a real human touch. Imagine this. You've done some cold outreach. Someone asked for more information. They received a reply asking them to schedule a meeting, because I just told you guys you should always steer towards scheduling a meeting instead of answering the question straight up. He would send a reply back to that email that would go to the upper flow, the ready to schedule flow, and he would receive an email. If the wait node would be set to 15 minutes each time, he would receive 2 emails exactly being 15 minutes after he sent one, which might raise some red flags, and we want to avoid that at all costs. That is why I use a custom line of code to give me a random number between 10 and 20 instead of a static number. But that is such a minor detail, you really don't have to worry about it. I just like to think of myself as a bit of a perfectionist, so that's why. So the setup for the other 2 parts of the flow are very similar. So both in this case, the ready to schedule case and the not interested one, we change the status of the lead accordingly in our CRM. For the not interested part of this flow, I've written a standardized response. I don't think it is best if someone has clearly shown they're not interested by explicitly saying it in their email or something like it to pester them and keep on hunting them. I think you should be respectful. So I always like to say, hey, thanks for the note, lead name, just for my own feedback. What makes this not interesting? Thanks a lot. Asking for feedback kind of gives you a bit of opportunity to continue on. Maybe there was something very specific about your cold outreach that didn't align with their vision. So if they respond back to this email, you could maybe continue the conversation and try to win him over anyways. And if he just says we already have this in-house or whatever, you can leave it at that and make sure you don't get into his spam folder. For the rest of this sequence I already touched upon, so a wait node, a Slack node to check, or the HTTP request node, which is just the Instantly API. Then for the third and final subflow of this entire workflow, the ready to schedule one, there is a pretty interesting part. In my cold outreach, I always send the link to book a meeting directly in my first email, but I also ask them to send me over sometimes. Some people are just too lazy or not technically savvy to click the link, or they don't want to press the link in a random cold email, so they'll send me over sometimes. That would make life a little bit more difficult, but in this case it wouldn't, because I've given the large language model access to my calendar. So if I receive some times in the email, it would go into this large language model, which would check the availability. One thing to note is that it would have to match time zones. As I said earlier on in this video, I'm from Amsterdam and most of my clients are from the US, and even inside of the US there are different time zones. So you have to give it today's date, my time zone, and the user's time zone. We know the user's time zone because we know their location, because it's inside of our CRM, because we know that when we scraped the lead. It's kind of like spying on someone. That's pretty funny. And then the prompt is kind of a step-by-step guide how I want the large language model to act. I know that it probably could be a lot shorter, so you guys don't have to copy everything word for word, but I just found that this one never makes any mistakes, while I've tried different variations which were shaky at times. So of course there are two possibilities when someone sends me over their available times. Either I am available or I'm not available. If I am available, it'll send them an email back that I will schedule a meeting at that time. If I'm not available, the LLM, the large language model, will have checked times that are very close to his suggestions, which I am available at, and it will send them back some of the times that I can actually make to make the entire process a lot easier. Because I always send the link to book a meeting directly in my cold outreach, them sending over times rarely happens, but in the case it happens, I have built this into my system, and I would strongly advise you guys to just copy everything I did, because this takes care of 99% of the email replies I receive, and it will do the same for you, I promise. Alright, that was a lot, but that was it. You now have the blueprint to build your own AI inbox manager. This system will help you stay on top of your leads, it will respond faster, and it will close more deals in the end, all without sacrificing sleep or without sacrificing your own time. I'm working hard every day trying to get my school community up and running, so you guys can download this workflow JSON file, because I've seen the comments, I've read through them, and I promise it's on its way. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and make sure to subscribe for more automation tips. Also, let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.